Hi, Susan here. It's been a while since I've made a video, and so I wanted to share with you um, what I'm doing to make some bags. Um, this bag was an experiment. I had a little bit of warp left on when I was doing rugs, and this is woven just like I would for a rug. But so I weave a rectangle, seam it up the uh, selvages, and the finish is, I think this is a full Damascus edging. So the white is actually the color of my warp. And then I just sewed on some strapping for a handle. And so this is kind of an odd size, but this was just the amount of warp I had left. But it's perfect bag to put my shuttles in. So I'm actually weaving this intentionally to become a bag, and I've planned for this one that it's going to be 15 inches tall. So I need overall a rectangle that's 30 inches, and I have a tape measure clipped on, so it looks like I need to go not very much farther and I'll have this section done. So the middle of the bag, or the bottom of the bag, is going to be right about here, if you can see in my video. And the width of this, let's see, I can tell you. Okay, it looks like it's about 18 inches, so the bag is going to measure about 18 by 15, assuming we don't have too much draw in. And I have this warp. This is a pretty heavy rug warp that I'm using, and I have it warped so that I have 4 warps per inch. So on my Union 36, I've used 8 spools of the rug warp. This is a 4-ply wool rug warp. I was a little worried that it might wear a bit, but it seems to be holding up pretty good. It gets a little bit fuzzy, but I have not broken a warp yet, so I'm really happy with that. And it's weft-faced. And so one thing when you're kind of planning how wide to set your warp is you need to have, I'll use this. This is some of my homespun. So if you look, you need to have space, actually probably more space than the width of your warp between your, or the width of your weft between your warps, so it will pack down. So this seems to work really well with this weight yarn. I don't know exactly how many yards per inch, but you can kind of see. So I'm using, get these big cones from R&M yarn, and they have a lot of mill-ins, so you can't count on going back and getting exactly the same colors because they may be completely sold out. But this is not really a strong enough yarn to use as warp, but it works just fine for the weft. And so I do have some of my homespun, which I tried to spin to be about the same weight. This is also a rug yarn, and you can see that it's a little bit thinner, but this is a more compact yarn, so when this blue gets kind of compacted down, it's actually about the same width. And so that's what my dark is this wool here. And I'm using basically, as far as for the color changes, you know, the same kinds of techniques you'd use in Navajo weaving. So it's weft-faced, it's beaten pretty heavily. I'm not doing any shapes within this. I'm just creating bands of different patterns within my weaving. And I'm just kind of being pretty free form. One thing is I'm not making one side of the bag match the other side of the bag, so because it gets really boring for me and I probably wouldn't be able to make it match up. So I actually enjoyed kind of playing around and trying different patterns. So right now I'm working on columns, and so all you do with this is alternate colors. So I have 2 shuttles with different colors, and I'm using floating selvages, and I have to make sure that I kind of wrap my yarn around, and I'm not sure that there's any one right or wrong way, but whatever you do, you want to be consistent with it. And like I said, I'm using floating selvages. Probably next time I'll double the floating selvages. I like a thicker selvage. Oops, and I didn't weave that in the right shed. Oops, makes a big difference in my pattern. Oh, I had a spool down there and it got underneath my treadle. Okay, so let's try this again. So with the columns, you're just alternating, and with the weft face, that's going to make your columns. So you can do all kinds of different patterns, and I'll talk about some of the different patterns and how I join. The one other thing I wanted to say about the floating selvage, if you haven't used a floating selvage, you can find lots of information. But this selvage, my 2 outside are floating, which means that they don't go through a heddle, so they're floating. So they kind of stay in the middle when I raise. I don't know if you can see, but they stay in the middle here, and so I want to catch those every time. And this is really important where you're changing colors all the time. It makes it a whole lot easier. You don't really have to think a whole lot about catching that outside warp. So if I can change, let's see. So I was doing every other pick was a different color, but now I'm gonna catch that. So now I'm gonna weave 3 picks of the tan. And then I'm going to weave 1 pick of the blue. And this is going to put like a dot of color in there. And now I'm going to weave 3 picks of the tan. I'll make sure I go around catch that blue there every time. So you do have to pay attention about how you're catching your outside threads. Let's see, I've got 1, 2, 1 more of the tan. And now I'm going to do another blue, so I'm going to make sure I go around my tan. So that's the basic idea, and depending on how many picks of what color, how you alternate, you can make all kinds of different patterns. So I'll talk a little bit more about joining and the different patterns. A good place to look for this kind of weaving is Rio Grande style weaving. So it's kind of like Navajo weaving, but on a loom. I'm just doing real simple things, but you can kind of see, the different patterns I can get just by changing. I use a temple, and so that helps me to keep the width of my piece consistent. I don't have too much drawing, but I like to use a temple. Just kind of, I think, makes things go a little more smoothly. So that's all for right now. And then later on I'll make a video showing how I put the bag together and some of the different patterns and finishing techniques.